Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this video, I just wanted to show you how I'm beginning the process of laying things out. I went ahead and broke out the fuselage pieces, the left and right wing halves, and then the plywood wing parts. Just put them in some separate bins. I've got the fuselage pieces here. This is going to be the next step in the build is building the pod, and I did not go into the bags other than just a cursory look through. I'll be breaking those out as needed, but I just wanted to get a little organization, and I did not separate the parts for the tail section yet because that's a later step. So just trying to keep a little organization going. I read a post on a forum about someone who had built this backwards, so you definitely want to be careful. Front and back look very similar. You can see the difference right here in this bit of curvature. Otherwise it almost looks semi-symmetrical. So make sure that you lay up against the plans, so you make sure you know the difference between front and rear, and likewise with the doublers, front and rear. And then you want to make a pair that face each other, like so, so that the doublers are going to each be on the inside. You don't want to have them both on the same side, and then you're going to have two lefts versus two rights. So this is just something to watch out for. It's not that tricky to figure out, but make sure that you're doing it correctly. You know, double, triple check everything, because once you glue, you've glued. So this is the first step in building the fuselage. There is a previous step in the instructions where you want to take F3, F4, and F5 bulkheads, and they are numbered. Everything is most parts have a laser scribed number on them. In this case, it's even got a crosshatch to make sure that you're leveling the tail surface correctly. This is not a bulkhead that's actually going to get glued on. But what you want to do is make sure that this hole, and this hole are sized correctly for the boom. In other words, you want to lay the boom up against the plans, and then you want to slide each bulkhead on from the narrow end of the boom until it comes forward, and make sure that where it lays up on the plans that it's fitting properly. In my case, everything fit fine out of the box. I did not have to do any sanding, but they recommend that you check before you build. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to enlarge these holes properly once they are glued into the fuselage and you're trying to insert the boom. And then it's kind of too late and it becomes a trickier job. So, like I said, I did that and everything fit just fine out of the box. But definitely check. Don't take my experience as gold. So now I'm going to begin the fuselage. I'm going to glue those two sides together using some slow CA. To try to save weight, I'm probably going to use CA for almost everything, either thin, gap fill, or slow. CAs, I may use a little epoxy here and there, but I'm going to try to limit that. The reason I'm going to use slow for these is that I want the opportunity to position them once they're in place. It's a large surface, so I'm going to be applying the slow CA to the doubler as opposed to the wood, because there's so many cutouts here, and you only want the glue where you need it. And then I'm going to put them in place. I'm going to try to line them up, you know, as well as possible immediately, because even the slow is only going to allow so much movement because of the amount of surface area it's going to want to grip. So try to get it right as soon as you lay it down. What I may do is put some pins, not through the wood, but at the edges, probably pointing out at a slight angle, or at the very most straight down. That way I've got something to guide the doubler as I'm laying it in place, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not. I'll talk about that later. if it becomes an issue, if I do that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and glue this and then start getting set up for the next steps, and that's where the video will resume. I'm not going to actually show the process of me gluing these on. I think I've described that well enough. Basically, you lay these up so you have a left and a right. You apply glue just to the, to this surface here, and then lay it on top and get it into position. So, fairly simple. Okay, so I have my two fuselage halves. Now it's time to glue the bottom sections together. The way I'm going to do this, in 3 steps. This is the center section. This is the very bottom, and then this is the top section of the bottom of the fuselage here. So, as you can see, this wood has little cutout sections. Those are going to match up to these little cutouts on the doublers. And the very base of the fuselage is this thin piece of plywood. And that's always a good idea to have a plywood base because you're belly landing glider. So having a stronger wood surface than balsa wood is a very nice piece of the design here. Now, this center section needs to be glued in place, and all 3 of these pieces need to be lined up properly on the center line. So I'm starting with the middle of the sandwich, as it were. And as you can see, I've made sure these are lined up properly. Okay, and I focused on lining up the balsa wood, not the plywood, because the plywood is going to self-center in here. Now, as you can see, it kind of moves a little bit on this surface here because it may have a little bit of curvature to the plywood. So I'm going to hold this down, and I'm going to use thin epoxy thin CA to tack this seam here, and then likewise at the front, and I'll probably apply a little bit of gaps filler here and hold this down with a piece of clear plastic just to make sure that everything stays in place. So once this is glued together and level, then I can flip it over and I can lay this doubler down from above and then flip it back upright and glue this piece here. They recommend using a small piece of scrap balsa wood that is the thickness of this gap to provide an alignment tool. But I'm more concerned that that this piece and this piece be aligned up with the with this the middle piece, because if it's not lined up properly, you're going to get problems fitting the fuselage halves and having things made up properly. So it's it's definitely a little bit of a tricky process here. It just needs to be done correctly. So take your time when you do this. It's always a good idea to read the instructions all the way through. The instructions say to glue the bottom pieces together on the plans. They only mean this balsa piece, this plywood piece, and this balsa piece, not the bottom skid. This gets put on later in the process. And fortunately, I was questioning the verbiage and read ahead. And at that point, I decided I'm just going to sit down and read every word of the instructions. I've looked on various forums at other people's build tips as well, but I hadn't fully read the instruction book itself, and always a good idea. I caught myself before I did something that I don't think would have made a big difference in the build, but always good to follow the directions of the designer. So I have glued this piece together, and the next step is to glue on this doubler, and that's what I'm going to do. And From there, it's a process of setting up the bulkheads in place and then gluing the sides on. So we'll go through this one step at a time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell icon, you'll receive notifications every time I launch a new video. Thank you for watching.